A grieving mechanic is just trying to get through the day when a new customer walks in, a woman who looks exactly like his late wife. But this isn't just some eerie coincidence. The encounter takes a wild turn when she shows him a familiar necklace, unraveling a secret he thought was buried forever. This is a story about a love that reached beyond the grave and a truth that simply refused to stay hidden. Section 1. The echoes of a ghost. For the last 5 years, the only perfume Jacob knew was the scent of grease, gasoline, and hot metal. It clung to his clothes, his skin, and the air in his small, tidy garage, evergreen auto. The name was a bitter joke now, a relic from a time when life felt full of promise. It was the name his wife, Clara, had picked out. She'd said it stood for a love that, like the pines in the forest, would never fade. But winter came for her anyway, fast and cruel, and left Jacob stuck in a permanent season of loss. 5 years. Some days it felt like a lifetime, others, it was like he'd just said goodbye. Grief was a phantom limb, a constant ache for someone who wasn't there anymore. He saw her everywhere, in the bright red of a new paint job, the same shade as her dress on their first date. He heard her laugh in the chime of the bell over the shop door when the wind hit it just right. His life had become a collection of these ghosts, these echoes of Clara. Jacob was a good man, known around their small town for being honest and skilled. People said he didn't just fix cars, he understood them. He could tell you what was wrong with an engine just by listening, his hands moving with a practiced grace that you wouldn't expect from their calloused, grease-stained appearance. He poured everything he had into his work because it was the only thing that shut off the noise in his head. A car was a puzzle he could solve. A broken engine could be fixed. A life couldn't. His own life felt stalled, permanently parked in the shadow of his grief. His friends had tried to pull him out of it at first. They'd invited him for drinks, dinners, fishing trips. He went a few times, a hollowed-out version of himself who smiled while his eyes stayed empty. Eventually, the invitations slowed to a stop, not because they were mean, but because everyone knew Jacob was in a place they couldn't reach. His garage became his sanctuary and his prison, its metal walls holding on to the last pieces of a life built for two, now lived by one. He kept her memory alive in small, quiet ways. A framed photo of her, smiling on a sunny beach, sat on his cluttered desk. He still made 2 cups of coffee every morning and left hers to grow cold on the counter, a ritual he couldn't stop. He was a mechanic who could fix anything but himself, a man just waiting for something, anything, to break the monotonous rhythm of his sorrow. He just never imagined it would show up as a ghost walking through his door. The day started like any other. The autumn sky was painted orange and pink, but Jacob barely noticed. He was under a stubborn sedan, fighting with a rusted bolt, the clang of his wrench the only sound in the garage. The bell over the door chimed. A customer. With a grunt, Jacob slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on an already dirty rag as he got to his feet. And then he froze. Standing in the doorway, framed by the bright morning sun, was a woman. For a split second, his heart just stopped. The world tilted, and all the sounds of the garage, the tick of a cooling engine, the distant hum of the highway, faded away. It was her. It was Clara. She had the same cascade of dark auburn hair that always seemed to hold the light. The same gentle curve of her jaw, the same light dusting of freckles across her nose. She even stood the same way, with a slight, curious tilt of her head. Time snapped backward, and for one breathtaking moment, Jacob was 25 again, watching the love of his life walk into a coffee shop and change his world. His breath caught in his throat. The rag dropped from his numb fingers. He felt the blood drain from his face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. This had to be a hallucination, a cruel mirage his lonely heart had cooked up. The woman took a step forward, and her curious expression softened into concern. "Excuse me. Is this Evergreen Auto?" she asked. Her voice. It wasn't Clara's. It was close, with the same melodic rhythm, but it was a little deeper. The illusion shattered, but the shock didn't go away, leaving Jacob trembling. He felt a dizzying mix of crushing disappointment and utter confusion. He finally found his voice, though it came out as a rough, strangled whisper. "Yes. This is it." "Oh, good," she said with a polite smile. But her smile faded as she really looked at him, at his pale, stunned face. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her words hit him like a punch. He gripped the edge of the workbench to steady himself. He swallowed hard, trying to get his bearings. This was a customer. He was a professional. But the words just fell out of his mouth before he could stop them, raw and unfiltered. "You look like my dead wife," he said. The confession hung in the air between them. The woman's smile vanished, replaced by an expression he couldn't read. It wasn't anger or pity. It was something closer to recognition. A deep, sad understanding that made no sense on a stranger's face. She didn't back away or look at him like he was crazy. She just held his gaze, her own eyes, the same impossible hazel as Clara's, softening with empathy. "Clara," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Jacob's world tilted again. How did you know her name?" he stammered, his mind scrambling for an explanation. Was this a friend he'd never met? A distant relative he'd forgotten? But the resemblance was just too perfect. The woman gave him a sad, knowing smile. "My name is Alara," she said softly. "My car. I think there's a problem with the alternator. The folks in town said you're the best." Her calm, matter-of-fact tone was bizarre next to the earthquake that had just rocked Jacob's world. He was standing face to face with his wife's double, a woman who somehow knew her name, and she was calmly asking for a car repair. It was completely surreal. But what else could he do? He was a mechanic. With a shaky nod, he gestured towards the bay. "Pull it in," he managed to say. "I'll take a look." Section 3, the unraveling thread. As Alara eased her car into the service bay, Jacob's mind was racing with questions and fractured memories. He moved on autopilot, his hands grabbing tools before his brain even asked for them. Every time he stole a glance at her, it sent another jolt through him. The way she tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear, the focused look in her eyes, every little gesture was an echo of Clara, a painful, beautiful reminder of what he'd lost. He popped the hood, the familiar maze of the engine a welcome anchor. He tried to focus on the frayed belt and the dead alternator, but his thoughts kept drifting. Who was this woman? And how did she know Clara's name? It was just too much to be a coincidence. Breaking the tense silence, Alara spoke, her voice gentle. "You must have loved her very much." Jacob froze. He turned to look at her, his defenses crumbling. He saw no pity in her eyes, just a quiet understanding that invited him to be honest. "She was everything," he said, his words thick with unshed tears. "My whole world. It's been 5 years, but it doesn't really get easier. You just find new ways to carry it." Alara nodded slowly, her gaze distant for a moment. "Grief is a stubborn companion," she murmured. "It changes the whole world around you." As Jacob started working, a fragile conversation began. He found himself talking about Clara in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. He told Alara about her infectious laugh, her awful singing, and her unwavering belief in him. He spoke, and Alara just listened, not like a stranger burdened with someone else's pain, but like someone who needed to hear every word. She, in turn, asked gentle questions. What was her favorite color? Did she have a favorite song? Tell me about the day you met. With every answer, he felt a little piece of the wall around his heart chip away. He was sharing Clara with this woman who had her face, and strangely, it didn't feel wrong. It felt right. He finally worked up the courage to ask his own question. How did you know her name? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't get how you're here. Elara hesitated, her gaze dropping to the purse in her lap. "It's a long story," she said. "And I'm not sure you're ready for it." "Try me," Jacob insisted, stopping his work. "After seeing my wife's ghost walk into my garage, I think I can handle pretty much anything." She took a deep breath. "I came to this town looking for her. For Clara. I've been searching for a long time. Searching for her." "Why?" "Because," Elara said, her hazel eyes locking with his, "I believe she was my sister." The wrench slipped from Jacob's hand and clattered to the floor. Sister. Clara was an only child. She grew up in foster care after her parents died when she was a baby. She didn't have any family. "That's not possible," Jacob said, shaking his head. "Clara didn't have any family." "She didn't know she had family," Elara corrected him softly. "We were twins, separated at birth. It was a closed adoption. The parents who raised me only told me the truth a few years ago. They gave me a box with the little information they had, a birth certificate with a different name, and the name of the agency. She told him about her journey, about hitting dead end after dead end until she finally tracked the adoption to a marriage license. Clara Miller had become Clara Hayes. The trail led her here, to this town, to this garage. But she was too late. The first person she spoke to at the town hall had offered condolences on her sister's passing 5 years ago. Jacob felt the floor shift beneath him. A twin. An identical twin. It was the only explanation that made any sense, and yet it was completely unbelievable. He finished the repair in a daze, his hands moving on muscle memory while his mind tried to process this new reality. He installed the new alternator, reconnected the battery, and clicked the hood shut. "It's done," he said, his voice hoarse. Elara opened her purse, but not for her wallet. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "I know this has been a shock. I wanted to meet the man who made my sister so happy." She paused, her hand trembling as she reached into her bag. "I came to learn about her, but I also came to give you something. I think she would have wanted you to have it." Section 4, The Necklace's Secret. Jacob watched, his heart pounding, as Elara's hand came out of her purse. She wasn't holding cash. Cradled in her palm was a necklace. It was a delicate silver chain with a single, star-shaped locket. A tiny sapphire, the color of a twilight sky, was set in its center. The air rushed out of Jacob's lungs. He stumbled back a step. It couldn't be. He knew that necklace. He knew every tiny detail. He'd given that exact necklace to Clara on their first wedding anniversary. He had saved for months to buy it from an antique shop, where the owner told him it was one of a kind. Clara cherished it. She never took it off. When she was buried, he made sure it was with her, a final piece of his love to keep her company forever. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice shaking. A dark, ugly thought crossed his mind. Had this woman robbed Clara's grave? Elara saw the look in his eyes and quickly shook her head, her own eyes filling with tears. "No, Jacob, it's not what you're thinking. Please, let me explain." She held it out. With a trembling hand, he took it. The cool, familiar weight was both a comfort and a torment. He fumbled with the tiny clasp and opened the locket, expecting to see the miniature photo of their wedding day he'd placed inside years ago. But the locket was empty. "It's a matched pair," Elara whispered. "Our birth mother left them for us. One for each of us." It was the only thing she left. She then pulled a chain from around her own neck. On it hung another locket. The exact same silver star, the same sapphire. She opened hers, and inside was a faded, tiny photograph of a young woman with their face, holding 2 swaddled babies. The truth, in all its impossible, heartbreaking glory, crashed down on him. There were 2 necklaces all along. Clara's locket wasn't one of a kind. It was one of 2. A matched set, meant to connect two sisters fated to live apart. Clara never knew, Jacob breathed, staring at the photo of their mother. She thought it was just a beautiful antique. She had no idea it was a link to her past. To you. When I found out she had passed, Elara continued, tears streaming down her face, I visited her grave. I saw the star's symbol carved on her headstone, the same star as my locket. The groundskeeper told me you had insisted on that design because of the necklace she always wore. She'd spent weeks in town, piecing together the life of the sister she never met, gathering stories from people who knew Clara. Her car trouble was real, a fortunate accident, but coming to his garage had been her plan all along. I didn't know how to approach you, Elara confessed. How do you just walk up to a grieving husband and tell him you have his wife's face? I was afraid you would hate me for it, for being a living reminder of what you lost. Jacob looked from the necklace in his hand to the one around her neck, then into her hazel eyes. He didn't feel hate. He felt a profound, aching sense of wonder. Clara was gone. But right here, in this garage filled with ghosts, he felt a new connection to her. It wasn't a miracle, but it was close. It was the other half of a story he never knew existed. He slowly closed his hand around the locket. It was a piece of Clara's history he never knew, a secret she'd carried without ever realizing it. And now, he could hold it for her. Section 5, Forging a New Evergreen. In the days that followed, Elara and Jacob learned to navigate the space between the past and the present. She extended her stay, and they spent hours together, not in the garage, but walking through the town that held so many of Clara's footprints. They went by the library where Clara had volunteered and the park where they'd had their first picnic. With every step, Jacob shared a memory, painting a portrait of his wife with his words. In return, Elara shared the life Clara never knew, pictures of her adoptive parents, stories of her career as a landscape architect. It was a strange and bittersweet trade. Jacob learned about the sister Clara should have had, and Elara learned about the woman her sister became. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes, a trick of the light would make the resemblance so painfully perfect that Jacob would have to look away, his throat tight with grief. For Elara, hearing about the bond Jacob and Clara shared was a reminder of a lifetime of connection she'd been denied. But through that shared sorrow, a new kind of bond began to form. It wasn't romance, and it wasn't a replacement. It was a friendship built from loss and discovery, cemented by the woman they both loved. One afternoon, they sat on a bench overlooking the lake where Jacob had proposed. He'd been quiet, turning the star-shaped locket over and over in his hand. You know, he said softly, for 5 years, I felt like Clara's story was over. Like a book that ended too soon. But you've brought a new chapter. Elara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that, for the first time, Jacob saw as her own, not just an echo of Clara's. She's not just a memory for you to carry alone anymore, Jacob. Now, we carry her together. In that moment, something shifted. The heavy blanket of his grief felt a little lighter. The garage, Evergreen Auto, no longer felt just like a monument to what was gone. The name, once a bitter reminder, now held a new meaning. Love, like an evergreen, doesn't have to fade. Sometimes, it just changes form, growing new branches in directions you never expected. The future was still unknown, but for the first time in 5 years, it didn't look empty. It looked like a story waiting to be written. CTA and conclusion. What would you have done if you were Jacob? It's a powerful reminder that love and connection can show up in the most unexpected ways, even after a profound loss. Jacob's love for Clara was so strong it felt like it drew the missing piece of her story right to his door, not to replace what was gone, but to make the picture whole. He learned that grief doesn't have to be a lonely prison. By sharing Clara's memory with Elara, he didn't lose any part of it, he gave it new life. Their story shows us that even in the face of impossible heartbreak, hope can find a way to grow, proving that some bonds refuse to stay broken forever.